Before we begin, I recommend that you watch the entire video. If not, you're going to be pretty lost. And if you don't know the fundamentals like a basic lurch or tap strafing, you should go watch my movement guide. There will be a link in the description. If you don't have the basics down, you're not going to be able to follow along. I would appreciate a like and a sub if this ended up helping you. So as many of you have probably seen, Respawn has absolutely cooked config users. You cannot use config files for movement, which includes neo-strafing. You can also no longer spin your little joystick in a circle and have hundreds of macros do the movement for you. In other words, you can't cheat anymore. And whether you're a beginner trying to learn how to strafe, or you're an ex-config user, this guide should help you out a bit. Before you start learning, I recommend that you learn with 131 mouse grip. That way you don't have to stress about relearning how to aim while lurching at the same time. A 131 grip is your thumb on the left side, pointer finger on shoot, middle finger on scroll wheel, ring finger on aim, and pinky on the right side of the mouse. This allows you to aim, shoot, and lurch at the same time. And trust me, if you're a complete beginner, you'll thank me for putting you on early. Another thing to note, make sure you're paying attention to the input overlay and the scroll wheel. This will help visualize when you need to be tap strafing or jumping. On the input overlay, you will notice that with every tap strafe / jump, I am inputting around 6 to 12 inputs per scroll. You can get a feel for how much you need to be scrolling on your mouse by scrolling slow, and your mouse will stop itself after one input is made. So make sure you're doing roughly 6 to 12 inputs per scroll. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to go over is a basic lurch. The inputs are pretty simple. For a lurch going left to right, you're going to go from holding A to AW to AWD, and then finish it off by holding DS. Of course, all while tap strafing. You're pretty much just making a hook shape with WASD. A really important tip when performing a basic lurch is you're going to want to be holding a directional key, plus S, either AS or DS, except when changing directions, which we will cover shortly. For a lurch going right to left, the inputs are in the same order but mirrored. So you're going to go from D to WD to WDA to AS, again all while tap strafing. When lurching, you want to make sure you go into your B-hops with the most momentum you can get. So whether that's sliding into them like I just showed, or wall bouncing into it. You can also wall bounce and double back, then start your B-hops. Here's a little clip of me wall bouncing, then doubling back to get enough momentum to start my lurches. Super gliding is also a really great way to gain momentum into your lurches. Alright, so this is going to be the basics to lurching. This is how I've taught some of my boys to lurch better, and it's how I learned myself. You're going to pick a spot in the range and just spin around it in a circle while holding S and a directional key, either A or D. Remember, when you're lurching, you're going to want to be holding S unless you're changing directions. It's actually pretty simple. First thing you should do is perfect this so you are continuously spinning. So make sure you're looking at the input overlay and the scroll wheel and that you're getting your timing down. You're going to want to perfect this before moving on. If you are timing your B-hops wrong, it'll look something like this. Next up is how to change directions while doing the basic lurch. I wouldn't do as many turns in one go as I am here. Just get comfortable with doing just one. Here it is in full speed, and then I'll show a super slowed down version with the inputs. It's pretty simple. You're basically just letting go of S and then making that same hook shape that we learned at the start, then going back to holding S and a directional input, either A or D. So this lurch is shifting our momentum from left to right. The inputs are A to AW to AWD to DS. This lurch is shifting our momentum from right to left. Inputs being D to DW to DWA to AS. Don't get discouraged if you can't get it right away. This literally took me thousands of hours to master. Keep watching the slowed down version until you can get it. You can also skip ahead to the timestamp labeled follow along to help build your muscle memory. But you're going to need to have this mastered before moving on to the Neo Strafe. Just a reminder, this is possible on other characters. Here's me lurching on Wraith. This isn't just a guide for Octane mains. Next up is a little mini version of the Neo Strafe. It's essentially all the key presses you need to do, but more spaced out. There's going to be a forwards lurch and a backwards lurch, both labeled with the key presses. Here we are shifting our momentum from right to left with a backwards lurch. The inputs are DS to DSA to SA. Notice how when I go backwards, I let go of the keys and repress them, because if you're just holding them while tap strafing, you won't go backwards. You need to let go of SD, then re-input it as D to S to A to get a lurch. Then we have forwards lurch from left to right, the key presses being A to AW to AWD to DS. Once again, a backwards lurch, right to left, D to DS to DSA to SA. And another forwards lurch, left to right, A to AW to AWD to DS. Next up is what you came here for, neo-strafing. We're going to use what we just learned without the pauses and some extra inputs thrown in there. After watching the slowed down version, I highly recommend going to the follow along section and getting the muscle memory down. Alright, so here's the neo-strafe. Don't mind tab being pressed on the input overlay. I think it bugged when I was alt-tabbing. As you can see, for neo-strafing, it's essentially just one pattern you need to learn and just repeat it over and over. One lurch is going to be that hook pattern that we just learned, except when we come around, instead of just holding AS, you're going to be holding just A, and then you're going to tap S with your middle finger, and then finish out the pattern with ASD, so you'll get 2 total S inputs. At the end of D, you're going to start your forward lurch again and repeat. The reason you're going to press S twice here is because it acts as a mini backwards tap strafe input and sends you further backwards. Now here it is slowed down. Once again, I highly recommend going to the follow along section and just getting the muscle memory down, and also be sure that you're scrolling correctly. Next up, we got the snake strafe, and then the backwards snake strafe. This one is actually pretty simple. You're going to want to start with lining yourself up with a line in the firing range. This one is essentially just a repeat of the 2 same hook lurches we learned, but inputted super fast. That being A to AW to AWD to D to DS, then back to D to DW to DWA to AS, and then just repeat those inputs. And the backwards snake strafe is that same wave motion we used while learning the neo strafe, that being DSA to ASD to DSA to ASD. Here's a little area I like to practice the snake strafe in the range. You just glide into it and go ham. Next up, we got the magic strafe. I think that's what people are calling it because my boy Magic either found it or he at least popularized it. It's pretty easy. All you do is just press S and a directional key and spin your mouse in tap strafe. It's pretty useless on its own, but it's a really good way to keep your momentum while reloading and then go back into a lurch. For this next pattern, I don't really have a name for it, but I found it out myself just messing around. I've seen other people do it, so it's not newly discovered, but basically it's just a super fast lurch. The inputs are WDSA or WASD in that order, super fast while tap strafing, and you'll do the little spin. Alright, so this is the follow along section. What I recommend you do is completely unplug your keyboard so the inputs don't mess with the video, and just watch the input overlay and try to copy my inputs in real time. Just try to get a feel for how fast you need to be pressing, and overall just build up your muscle memory. There will be separate timestamps for each kind of lurch, so just click back as many times as you need. There will be a full speed example and a half speed example.
It's go time!
A quick little tip is whether you're strafing uphill or downhill, the timing for the scroll inputs are going to be a little different. A flat surface is the best place for lurching. Maps like Storm Point and KC are pretty bad for lurching, but it's still possible. And if you throw together everything you learned, you can chain lurches like so. An awesome way to practice lurching and 131 grip is to play R5 Reloaded. They have 1v1 servers where you can practice movement and fights, but beware, people on those servers hate movement players. I've had 3 professional Apex players tell me to go outside and touch some grass. So shout out to those guys for sure. That being said, that is going to be it for this guide. If you learned something, I'd really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Make sure to leave a comment if you have any questions. I'll try to answer them all. Appreciate you guys. Stay blessed.
Oh my god.